FaceTime. Hey, primetime partiers! It's primetime party time, a virtual, online, all things I could say digital radio show and podcast where we talk about what should be in your prime time right now. I'm your host, Tracy, and this is
Daniel. Again, great intro, Tracy. Getting better at that every time. I like seeing the intro evolve.
Yeah, whatever I dissemble to ramble and jumble into there. But yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I am enjoying some apple matcha tea, and it is quite lovely for nice early January beverage.
Yeah, I got some peach honey myself. Hope everybody else is enjoying their refreshing beverages tonight here on Primetime Party Time, ptptshow.com. We're drinking tea, but we're always interested to hear what you're drinking too. Hit us up in the chat there on the website. Other announcements this week. I think we have the voicemail widget up on the site. So if you if you have thoughts on the content, if you want to talk to us, and info at PTPT Show or just finding us isn't enough, feel free to leave us a voice message of whatever you'd like. We get to listen to it. We may even be able to incorporate it. Who knows? But yeah, it should be working. It definitely works on mobile. The widget's a little finicky, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we recommend you start on mobile. But yeah, if you have afterthoughts that you couldn't get through the chat during real time, voicemail is a great place to leave some thoughts, and we can touch back and yeah, as Daniel said, see what we can do. So, woot woot woot.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, tonight we're doing something a little different than we've done so far in the past, but we are going to keep it consistent and do this week's toast and roast. What have you got, Tracy? What are you toasting? What are you roasting this week?
What am I? There is a lot to roast if I were to choose.
Yeah.
All you have to look at is the news. No, that's not trying to be a dystopian Dr. Seuss. But yeah, my main roast, I'm going to choose a low-level one because, like, as a nation, we all have our roast, and it looks like it has face paint and cheap Viking horns. But as an individual roast, I would say I would like to roast not people. You know what? I won't judge, but the concept dry January. I just, I don't feel the need to drink a lot during the beginning of the year. But one thing I do not like to be told is that I shouldn't.
People are telling you?
Well,
I actually
not
like
a physical person telling me, but like metaphorically, there's a lot of people doing like quote unquote detoxes and all this stuff. And I'm just like, this is the repeat every year. Everyone is like, if I change out and have green juice. Some
Tracy's
people
laughing because we got a message in the chat.
Yeah, message in the chat of people who do like dry January. Yeah, I'm a little bit about just like fully, if you feel like you've done too much over the holidays, just like moderation. Just go back to your usual. Don't just like go to the extreme. Because I just feel like that means like in February, you're just going to like being like, oh man, I need a cocktail.
Right. Well,
right
peer
now.
pressure is the wrong reason to do
or whatever
anything.
it is. Yeah, like you should do whatever you want for yourself. But I was like, I think getting like spammed with all these ads that were about different, like fitness challenges you should be doing and, things people are like cutting out. And I'm just like, listen, I'm just going to be a little new agey and say that you should add on to yourself instead of, holding back. You should do that instead.
Has anyone ever like programmed like anti-ads in that sense? Like if you feel that you're being
I
targeted, could
know.
you like kind of pull together a little bit of money and just kind of like shoot out as a voice for like the opposition of the ads that the people in your kind of like interest group, like your what psychographics are getting?
I would love a spite ad.
A spite,
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
a
very
spite
much
ad.
in the
Be a good agency.
the
All
vein
right.
of the I know. Start my marketing company now. Yeah, it would definitely be called Spite Media.
Spite mean.
All you
Ooh,
would do is run
media for the
ads
times.
against things that you're targeted.
Yeah.
That would be hilarious. I'm really for that. I'm almost the kind of person who would use their personal time to make spite ads to change my algorithm if it was possible, which who knows? Maybe that's a nice little homework assignment someday. I don't know if I
I
currently
do
have
like this
enough,
idea.
homework time to figure out how to do a spite ad, but if I could, I definitely would. I would love to make some spoofs and at the same time give the finger to initiatives that I'm not into. It would be nice. I know it's weird being on the other side of falling into a targeted group and being like, oh, what did
Mm,
I click to get here?
right. Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's my roast. It's lighter this week. I think I got enough out
Yeah.
last week, and I still don't have to do virtual jury duty yet. It's
Oh, nice.
pending.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to check in like a
Enjoy this
couple
how this is
weeks.
an ongoing thread. That's nice.
Yeah, I'm keeping everyone along for the journey of whether or not I participate in civic duty. So
Nice.
we're gonna find out. Yeah, we talked about this with one of our friends on, the kind of people who like to participate in jury duty. I think I find myself surrounding myself with many friends who are like, yes, I want to be picked. And then there are the ones I have that extend so many times that they are dismissed. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's a mixed box there. My toast for this week. Oh, actually, yeah. My toast for this week is I found this artist. Her name is Tess Henley, and she does some originals and some covers. But one thing I found is I was watching a Truly ad, and she did a cover of the Happy Days theme song, and it was just really fun. And, if it weren't for copyright, I would throw a little jingle on for you guys. But I'm just going to let you know if you search it through YouTube, it's a very good time and it's not on Spotify or anything, but I was into it. It felt also like many of the things that we discuss on here a kind of return to simpler nostalgia. So I was very into that. And I think also that ad campaign like gave back to artists and stuff. So I was like,
Nice.
well, that's nice. I
That's
needed
awesome.
a little bit of like a pick me up last week. So I thought that was a good way to kind of go back into like, all right, what are the things that, not to be too Marie Kondo y, but like spark joy when you're feeling back under the weight and stress of pandemic mania. But I'm
Yeah.
hoping most of it is behind us. But yeah, how about your toast and roast, Daniel?
Oh. In a not so quiet week, what am I toasting and roasting otherwise? Uh, all right. Like I don't have much to roast about personally, but I did. I don't know. I had a weird DoorDash driver this week. Um,
Ah, do tell.
I don't, it's kind of worn off, which is nice, and I don't mean to be petty, but I was called. It was a Chicago number, so I was like, all right, I'll pick it up. Let's see what happens. Someone from Chicago,
Yeah.
and I had kind of forgotten that I had even ordered food. So when they were just like, "Oh yeah, I'm here," I'm like, "No, you got the wrong number," and they were just like, "No." I'm like, "All right, that usually does not happen." And so then we were kind of just, it's supposed to be contactless delivery, so just kind of like, all right, well, could we leave it? Like, is there anything you need my help with? And all you hear from the other end of the phone is, "Oh my god." And I'm like, "Wait, what? I'm right here." Like, what do you mean? And she proceeds to, "Oh my god," 3 more times during the phone call.
A
So
thrice
that's
OMG.
why that's why I like to just I go out, take a walk, get in my car. I don't know. This kind of stuff stresses me out, and that's my roast. And my toast, can I do like a semi self promotional toast?
I
Um,
would appreciate it. I don't think we toot our own horns enough, so
yeah.
we're a
So a project that I kind of like help with um from time to time has their residency at an online radio station this month. Uh
that is great.
yeah, the radio station's called Dub Lab.
Yes.
They're really cool. I like them a lot. I've liked them since I got involved in the project. So yeah, it's we're just kind of doing some like curation there. There should be some radio shows with some of the artists involved. I get to do some of the like
Nice.
visual curation for it, and it's cool to like
Oh,
be I just want to like kind of toast this station cuz I like internet radio obviously. And
obviously.
so yeah, big toast to Dub Lab. And to
Aw,
Desolation
that's
Center for their residency this month of January. So go check it out if you're inclined to check out some more internet radio.
yes, I love a nice media-related PSA. We love that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that makes me oh, that is a good toast.
Ah,
And,
toasting my tea.
I think the roast to delivery is warranted. It's not anyone's fault, but it's not consistent,
Is it?
and it does not
I
make
don't do it
sense,
often.
and
It
I
stresses me
don't
out.
either, mostly because of the results. Because 'cause you're just
Oh.
like, once they get there, if something's wrong, you kinda just have to accept it
And I
and
ordered
just
something
go,
else this
this
week.
is"
And I walked in, mask on and everything, and the food was waiting on the counter. And the woman was like, "Yep," and he made it. And she pointed down the counter at this dude, and this dude waved, and I cheers the food in my hand, and it was a great experience. It was so much better than
See,
it was.
that is a
And I took it home. And the
beautiful
presentation was
moment.
great. But yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I picked up food at a yeah, I talked about it last time about at the one Vietnamese place I like in Escondido, and the people there are always so nice. Like I went to pick it up, and she's like, "Love your pastel outfit." And I was like,
oh,
"I love to pick up delicious food and be pumped up a little bit." Like it might be, and if it felt genuine to me, so I was like, "Oh, pep in my
that's nice.
step
I
and
miss the world.
fried tofu in my belly. Not a bad day." So, yeah, we we like an order pickup. I'm very pro that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like
Um.
it's
Yeah.
rough out there.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Stressful. No.
but
No. But obviously, don't have too much to be petty about this week. I
no,
think that's the toast and the roast. And when we get
that
back from this
is.
very short break, we'll be into the main course of this episode.
Yeah.
Yep, that's this is as short of a break as we're getting tonight, Tracy.
Woo woo! Well, welcome to Ghosts of Primetime Past. We're gonna go
Nice.
back to some shows that both were on the radar, some that flew a little underneath. The main thing all of them will have in common is that they are cult followed shows. So ones that maybe were around primetime, but have a lot more of a following both after and I'd say have been resurged during the streaming services. So, especially during now, where watch time is just on the rise. so, so yeah, this week we're going to talk about Angel. Angel is a spin-off show from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It aired on the WB on October 5th, 1999 until May 19th, 2004. There are 5 seasons, 110 episodes. Did I get this from Wikipedia? Definitely did. And,
I got the same information,
and
so
yeah, I mean, I fact checked it. I know, but you know what? I trust Wikipedia and Reddit pretty well. Where I'm like,
you
I'll
kind of tell
double
when
check,
something's up.
but I know there are some people out there willing to do the Lord's work in terms of research. So
It's like some people may have like fibbed their height on Wikipedia, some public figures, but aside
you
from that,
know,
you kind of know.
people lie about their height whenever they get a chance. So, so back to Angel. Yeah, we want to chat about a few. We watched a few episodes, and we're gonna like just kind of get into the general feelings of this show, like what made it memorable, what made it prime time. And yeah, I was start off with saying that there's even a Vox article from 2020 that was going into, why you should binge watch Angel now during the pandemic. And I thought it was an even another reason what helped support why we think this is a show worth remembering, a show worth revisiting and rewatching. So yeah, let's get into it. Angel.
What's your history with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel?
Yeah, like very obsessed with Buffy. I watch it like every October to like I get
All 7
Halloween's
seasons?
yeah. Oh yeah. It's a
Wow.
commitment, man.
Whoa. That is. That's
Yeah,
that's amazing. Wow.
it is. Well, part of it is like I'll have it on in the background while I'm doing stuff because I've seen it a bunch of times, and then it's like my bedtime show, and then I just, it keeps
Mhm.
going. And there's definitely specific episodes where I'm like, oh, I love this one, and I'll like stop what I'm doing and make sure to pay more attention. But yeah, I watch it in my like spooky season because I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday, so I like to, get into it and have some very coordinated shows. So I
Nice.
love Buffy. I think it was like a little bit, old for me when it first came out. So I mostly have watched it as soon as it got on to Netflix and Hulu. And then it's kind of like as soon as you're getting towards like the point where Angel begins, you're like, Angel's leaving the show? No. And then it's like, oh, no, no, no. Don't be upset. He's getting his own spinoff. And then you're like, yes. So it's definitely one of those where like it definitely does fill some fan joy of not having to fully say goodbye to characters because even if they're kind of ousted out of Buffy world, a lot of them come back into the Angel world in a meaningful way. I mean, some I think more so than others. Like I remember before we kind of started rewatching this, I was kind of like, I mean, I like Cordelia, but eh. And then when I watched Angel, I was like, oh, I forgot. Like she got a lot more. I mean, she grew throughout Buffy, but then when you take her to Angel, it's like a whole nother level. And you're like, no, no, this character is good. I didn't give her enough credit because I only watched Buffy mainly. So I think that's like a cool thing is you get to see characters who maybe didn't have enough space to grow on one show because it wasn't part of the focus and kind of the storytelling strategy. Get that in Angel. And it's also one where like you definitely learn more if you've watched both shows. You could watch Angel without seeing Buffy. You might just kind of have some moments where they do like crossovers where it's less of a yay, this person is back. And you're kind of more like, oh, I understand this is an ex-girlfriend, but what is the significance?
Right.
And you would maybe need to see more of that. I think it definitely will resonate with you more if you've seen both shows. But
As someone who's only
yeah.
seen Angel, I would agree with that
Ooh.
statement. Yes.
Oh,
I mean, though
it's
Angel
next.
Angel as a spin-off does a very it does a great I mean, it does a great job in a lot of areas.
Yes.
But something I mean, it's very easy. It sets up any crossover characters just as like greater conflicts for the characters of Angel. Which we see in we when we decided to kind of like dive into this and watch this series and kind of like figure out what it was all about. One of the episodes that we chose was an episode that kind of takes the series in a very early shift, which is the ninth episode of the first season called Hero.
Yes.
And that episode begins right after what I want to say is probably the first crossover episode of the series. And so it sets up a lot of the conflict that you can tell there is kind of like a hole in Angel's life at that point. Um, and so that it stands on its own. Obviously, there's way more to it if you understand the dynamic between him and Buffy specifically, or any of the other characters. Um, but yeah, it for the most part, everything stood on its own, minus a couple times in that I mean, well, not even minus, but obviously a couple times in the later seasons, characters are going to come back as like a last hurrah. And I didn't understand any of
Yeah.
that, but it still worked. Like all the episodes still definitely work standalone.
Yeah, and, like, when I was watching the pilot, what's really interesting after watching it kind of in the time period we are now is the pilot is there's, the whole kind of premise is that he goes to LA and it's kind of this a few shows like Lucifer's done this too, where it's like LA is the closest thing to hell, which everyone from SoCal's like, LOL, we
I mean,
like
are
LA,
people
but
making
also so
TV not going to think that?
exactly. And also people who've experienced traffic. I think
Yeah.
they're all like, "Yes,
Yeah.
we have
Yeah. A
we
lot feeds into
understand.
it.
We understand this." The comparison isn't completely off base.
Right.
But they also have it be like this Wolfgram and Hart, which is the law firm, defends all these like demons and monsters. And one of them is a vampire who's supposed to be a like network media investor who's chronically like finding young struggling actresses and then sucking their blood, and the lawyers have to clean up and make sure people don't know about it. And he kind of says, there's even a line he says where he's like, I pay my taxes, I do my part, I stay quiet, and I get to do whatever I want. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like very me too. And that, but it was also like when you're thinking about it, like this was a long time ago, this was like 1999, so I thought it was like an interesting risk the writers took, and I appreciated it because I was like, this is something that like you see certain references in a lot of like comedy shows that are kind of like quick, but this was kind of more of like an extended plot line. So I was like,
Mm.
and for a pilot, so like
Yeah.
on the surface it is very much like a vampire, and you could just like look at it that way. But when you're looking at how the whole setting was, and he would like meet these girls at parties and all this stuff, you're kind of like, this sounds more familiar now that we are in 2021. So I thought that was really, really cool take on how to, talk about maybe a subject that was more taboo then, but still make it within this universe, and also by still making a message. And kind of Angel's role when he comes in to be this like champion is to intervene with a lot of these things that are happening. And it's this weird kind of like, he's supposed to be helping the powers that be kind of do the good versus evil, while there's also this law and justice of the divine, but also of the, regular people. So it's kind of
Yeah.
that there's a lot of like metaphor and art imitates life. I found when rewatching it that I didn't really catch
I mean, there is, but
earlier
that's
on.
kind of like the beauty of Angel, right? It's like you said, it's like
Yeah.
it was going like Angel's kind of contribution, um, like to primetime television. I mean, amongst many things, is it did kind of like it took things darker, and
Yeah.
especially took things from like I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is like a classic pitch, right? It's like the what
Yes.
if we did the whole horror high school thing and then like flip the expectations of like the blonde girl, and then
Yeah.
Angel's more so like great, like let's kind of like take the ideas of this fantastical world and like make this sort of darker story with redemption to it and take it down to LA and get kind of grungy, and the whole like
Yeah.
helping the helpless, which is the philosophy of the characters in the show. It inherently like just provides like a strong philosophy. It provides like really dire stakes, and it kind of gets you into that kind of like dire, I mean obviously helpless, um kind of like, I guess, vibe, for lack of a better word. What I'm saying is like
Yeah.
it's a really strong spin-off for a strong pitch for a show
Yeah.
already. And so what I was reading is like in the first episode they actually did write an episode, um submit it to the network, and they weren't actually able to produce it because it was so dark at the time. And
Wow.
so it's interesting, and it's cool watching Angel kind of the series grow up, starting in 1995 or 1999, and then kind of going through to 2004, because that was a transformative time in television. And
Yeah.
Angel kept up. Like Angel is a different series by the end of the show, and it's kept up with all of the other like behemoths that have come out, all the sort of like starting to like be serialized like flagship shows of all of these networks on drama, Angel's caught up to that despite being somewhat of like a lower budget procedural show in the beginning. And it's fun to kind of watch the meta of the show evolve over time, and it's more fun to think and be like, wow, like what would it look like today? Because it was
Yeah.
evolving over time with the rest of the television landscape while it was even airing.
And it was taking a lot of risks. It definitely feels like a transitional show, and forgive us for getting real like film and media student on you, but it's like there are these shows where they're wrapped up in a episode and each one you could watch standalone. And Angel is like you could watch standalone episodes, but there are also larger ongoing plot lines where you have to watch the full season to figure out what's going on. And you have to watch the full series to kind of figure out how they all intertwine with each other. So I think that's true. It's definitely during this like transition of TV going to being like the golden age of TV and like getting kind of from those like there was like a lot of shows during that time too, like Charmed and other things that are like
Mm-hmm.
these supernatural shows that are really good, but they had to kind of grow from the more like kind of corny, kind of bewitched side of like supernatural shows and get to be this like bigger than just the world of vampires and have it like, you know, have it relate to regular life too. And I think that's something that this show does really well. And I think you said it really well with like redemption is a huge theme in this show. And like when Faith comes in, who's another Slayer from Buffy, that's like a big thing too, where he's kind of, you know, for lack of better words, he is kind of an anti hero. And so, but he's also an actual hero. And I think kind of when he switches from being his like evil self to his regular self, it is supposed to kind of be like you're rooting for him, but he also does make these like missteps and goes reverts back. And it's kind of supposed to be, you know, you're showing that very humanistic journey without him being a human. So it's one of those like, ooh, twist. But I think like when you get later on, where we watch the episode, we're in the ballet and you see all the different
Wait,
characters interact and there's like the different, you know, dimensions and they're still like very mystical magical, but you're also seeing them kind of have these character relationships that are very warm and connected, and it's like they are this team that's kind of us against the world, but they do get to kind of have these breaks every once in a while in the season where it's like they do more of like a, I don't want to call it like a filler episode because that gets a negative vibe, but I also when I watch shows I like the ones that are just kind of like adding on to what's happening, but they are also just like enjoyable because sometimes you just don't need to go on the roller coaster. But yeah, what do you feel about the later in season 3 energy?
yeah, so we definitely like I've never seen any of season 2. I started watching Angel honestly last year. My girlfriend and I came up with like a sort of like a I guess a coronavirus like COVID like activity, which was to essentially like we were going to share a season of a series that like was
Nice.
important to us or understood us like as a person. Hers was season 5 of Angel. So I went into the first
Oh.
episode of season 5 just not really knowing anything. Um so so it's interesting when we were doing like that's the series. Like that's the universe of Buffy and
Yeah.
Angel for me. Which is somewhat of a limited context. But so when we started doing this exercise, seeing season 1 and the different show that it was really interesting. And then moving on to season 3, it was the show that I had been watching in an infancy state. And it was sort of like building up to the show that obviously they finished out with. I guess like my main thoughts like when we got to season 3 and we got to those more character driven stories with the characters that the show finishes out with is that I was surprised at how much of the dynamic was the same or building towards the same, building towards the conclusions that the series gets to. Things like
Yes.
Wesley and Fred as characters. Angel and Cordelia obviously is something that doesn't really end up having payoffs in season 5. That kind of happens before season 5. And what's interesting is they bring in another character from the franchise, Spike, to finish out the series. And I feel like
Yes.
Spike is able in like the scene by scene structure to give a lot of the same effect that Cordelia was able to in the first 4 seasons, being sort of like a comedic situational humor kind of role, and also being the like close one to Angel as a character. So that was fun, but also it's really interesting because season 3, and especially the episode we watched, which was episode 13, Waiting in the Wings, uh, it was, I like to describe it as optimistic as season 5's tone is desperate.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And it's funny that you say that Spike had a really similar kind of character placement as Cordelia, because I read that he wasn't supposed to really have that much of a presence on Buffy, but he just had such good chemistry with the cast that as soon as like Cordelia was out, they kind of started featuring him back in Buffy to
Oh
kind
wow,
of replace that energy. So
that's
very
interesting.
good
Yeah,
Spidey senses there.
yeah.
And same thing for like Angel. He kind of came back on there because people were huge fans of him, and I agree. He's got a lot of good one-liners, and I think as he returns in the final season, he brings kind of a new twist of like the competition that they have to be like the vampire with a soul champion people. And that's also, I think we also like, if you're someone who watched Buffy, you like to see Spike and Angel kind of duke it out
Oh,
because
it's a great television dynamic.
yeah,
It's a
it's
blast. It's
it's
also
fantastic.
really necessary in the 5th season, because so as I was watching, I had a billion questions, obviously, that all do get answered over time.
Yeah,
Now I don't get some of the layers, like watching this Waiting in the Wings episode. Like it layered a lot of the conflicts that come up with the Wesley and the Gunn characters in season 5. But everything else that I had questions on, it was great because I'd kind of like message the questions, and then the next episode, the next 2 episodes, the naturally everything would get addressed. Um, where was I going with this? But I think with the it's something about Angel and Spike. Um, oh yeah. Their whole thing is that basically, like, Angel is really only he only has like a relationship with Spike early on in season 5. It's like really disjointed cast, and I couldn't figure out as a viewer sort of how everything fit together
ah,
because Angel didn't really associate or like have much of like a deep relationship with anyone else in the main cast, which is very rare for the show's like title main character to not actually be. I mean, he is wildly important in everybody else's lives, obviously, and he's what they revolve around,
yeah,
but not in a personal way that you would expect to find in like 5 years into a show, which is answered in the second half of the season. But he does have that with
yeah.
Spike, and that's like a crucial sort of anchor. I felt just coming in as like a new viewer, which is Angel's not the show to do that in, but here
Yeah,
we
I
were.
think part of that too is when if you watch Buffy, when Angel goes bad the first time, where it means like he loses his soul, Spike is kind of like his buddy, and from like ancient times they were like kind of like a dynamic duo of treachery. And then, they both kind of become better people like he does because of the curse of the soul, but then
Mhm.
Spike does kind of after he, at first begrudgingly and then, more warm, he really wants to impress Buffy. And be the one for her. So he kind of also that like motivates him to start doing kind of things on the side of good. So there are a lot of these like good versus evil and gray area in between, motifs throughout. And I think it's because they're given a lot of choices and it's a lot of like, did you pick the right chalice? And a lot of time, and there's a lot of like of the cosmic, like, if you do this, then something is going to come after that. And I think a lot of that is, in that same vein, it is a really nice way to kind of do, even though it's mystical, it's also like things like we can all relate to as well. It's a weirdly relatable show for
Yeah.
being about creatures
Yeah,
that
but that's I
you
mean,
can't relate to. And I
that's
think
the
that's like the beauty of it. And season 5 is like they have to wrap up a lot of stuff. They found out they were canceled about halfway through. So there are a lot of episodes where you're kind of like, okay, a lot of vignettes that are tying up loose ends from kind of both shows to
hmm.
make sure like you kind of know what's going on. Cause yeah, there's like an episode in the last season where they're like going after Buffy and Rome, and it's mostly just to kind of show that they're like, we both still pine for her. Keep that going on. We didn't forget, and they still can kind of have that competitive edge towards each other. But a fun fact I have for season 5, as I
Hmm.
was watching some other episodes other than the one that we'll get into, is that Connor, the son, uh, I thought he looked a little familiar when I was watching, and I thought this guy kind of looks like Pete from Mad Men, and
Yeah,
turns
he
out
does.
it was.
Yeah.
And I did not notice that in previous viewings of the show, so I thought that was a real kind of fun little nod and go, oh, look at you, super young in this like Peter Pan from Hell getup at first, and then he kind of
That's
gets a
funny.
little bit more normal
See,
after
and
that.
yeah, I only saw his redemption episodes. But the whole series,
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about how relatable the show was, and
Yes.
kind of how it worked, and like a big part of like kind of despite being about creatures, despite being about vampires and demons and whatnot, and it seems like such a high concept show. But that's what's kind of like fun about it is that like Joss Whedon and David Greenwalt and the rest of the writers' room, it's like they were able to pitch this like, all right, like here's the show. It's about this vampire. It's his redemption. It's like here's how we can do like weekly, like here's how we can structure a show around this. But because it's draped in fantasy, they can play with the rules, they can play with the stories they can tell, and it's really just this like this writer's room kind of just like understanding TV and playing with the craft of TV, and it's and just having like strong philosophies to go into, and being able to explore various different scenarios procedurally through such a strong high concept that just allows them, because it is creature based, to sort of like bend rules to whatever they need to tell whatever stories they want to. Makes for it's
That
just a fun, really like TV literate show, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
No, it's true. Like, because it is so fantastical, they are able to say things without saying things. And so, from like especially now, since we watch a lot of shows that are produced by streaming platforms that don't necessarily have to answer for the same sort of checks that a network broadcast produced show did, you do
Mm-hmm.
see that where they're like, oh, these people got to take a lot of risks, but through the lens of vampire, demons, witches, like all this stuff. And I think you're right. What you do see, like when you read between the lines of the show, is a lot of fun to be had if you were a writer in that writer's room of like, hey, I really want to talk about this that's happened, but how do we make it angel? And I get that vibe a lot from when you're watching a lot of these episodes. There are a lot of kind of almost human interest piece type
Mm-hmm.
episodes. And then there's still also the greater character development happening, but you get to see like a lot of their cases, I think, reflect that side of it, of things that you would experience yourself. but just, instead of it being just like random Joe Schmo on the street, it's like a demon from this dimension. So that's kind of how they get around. Yeah, getting around the rules when you have like the ability to like bring people back from the life, have them become part of like higher power, have them kind of go into lower power. It's really interesting too, because you're kind of showing a lot. They show a lot of like hierarchy and within that morality. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting show for many reasons, but also in the risk they take, the freedoms they had within a lot of probably strict, guidelines, and it lives up now. So that's really cool. I think if we backtrack and we look a bit at the season 1 episode we watched where
Hmm.
it's about this guy who's like a half demon, and then there's these kind of like almost Nazi like or Slytherin like demons that are like only the pure bloods, and you watch a lot of that going like but you're also looking at similar similar concept of like they took something that people do experience and they made it in a demon context, and that guy like definitely went out with a bang. I think it also kind of showed that the writers were not afraid to kill off characters.
Yeah.
and and that will happen throughout the show. It's almost like, I mean, Grey's Anatomy did it a lot to where you're like, who's coming next? But like that's like a show that I think of, or Game of Thrones, where like, but I think what's hard is in the Buffy universe, since it was such a like people don't come back, from the dead like they could. Like, in other shows, it's like, no, that person's gone. They're
Hmm.
done. We'll never see them again. And with Buffy, it's almost an Angel. It's almost this weird thing of like, well, are they like forever dead or just for like the summer or
So, and that's
what's
what
going on?
it
And
was.
then when people are actually gone, it's even worse because you're like, dang it, like why didn't they do the spell?
Right, and but and so that is kind of the funny thing is, and that's what was like the hardest thing, like coming off of so many shows that have such established rules, to like dive into, or
Yeah.
to kind of like just like kind of let myself as a viewer just kind of like let go of those rules and be like, okay, like we're just in the hands of whatever they want the rules to be. They can make them up as they go along, and the best way that I've ever had Angel described to me is that it's a show about the moments, and
Yes.
like it manages to get there despite all, because it's like the character who goes out with a bang, like they brush it off, just basically like these godlike beings are just like, we could bring him back but like we won't. Like within the first scene, and they're like, no, his story arc's done, we say it's done, and it works because the show wants to explore something else, and brings in some more longtime characters to explore instead, and you just kind of trust, because they're having so much fun making it, um, that's not like, yeah, it just it works despite you having to get on board with like the, all right, like the normal rules are out. um it's the writer's rules, and I feel like that there's so often times that does not work in television or any
Yeah.
media, any storytelling, and they make it work, and it comes down to these really great moments.
Yeah, despite being a very free show and like I said, not that many rules, it is still very organized and the continuity is quite good.
The
Like
continuity's
there's
great.
not
The season
yeah.
3 episode we watched, like
Yes.
it's it just like it layered, one, the conflict between Wesley and Gunn, but I was surprised that one of the biggest moments in the finale at the end of its fifth year, I mean, really the moment that I think about when I think about the episode,
Yeah.
is the Wesley lie to me moment, and that is like, I didn't realize that was still in its infancy so early in the season. Like that took a very
Yeah.
long time to pay off, and it pays off in such an interesting, unexpected way that does keep its continuity despite everything going on around it, and it takes until the end of the series to pay off. It's amazing.
Yeah. You got to know that somebody was keeping track of all the different plot pivots
I have
that they
no.
made in this show. Like that's how I feel. That or people have a very good memory, but
I have
it does feel like just like octopus legs that were able to just like keep track of everything and then just bring it all together
I was
was
reading, prepping for this episode, and I have no idea where I read it, so I really hope it's
ooh.
true. Please fact check it before telling anybody else. But that while they were making, I guess, while they were producing I think it was the ballet episode that we watched, the season 3 episode, uh, they were kind of like planning out this shot, and Joss Whedon had kind of like, all right, like here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this really great sweeping, pan over. We're going to see Angel in the mirror, and then the whole room grew silent during production, and the DP was like, hey man, like he's a vampire, right? Like we actually can't. So it's like everybody was kind of like on the same page, working towards the same goal here, and the show was just kind of like laser focused with that stuff. I mean, obviously, it's TV. Like, I doubt you can find anything that doesn't have like some sort of weird, who knows what. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, it works. It works, and
it
it is laser
does. I
focused, and the
mean,
continuity is laser focused.
I
Good
think
script,
the main
supervisor.
difference if you watch like vampire shows of the True Blood era versus like the Buffy Angel era is the face, of the vampires in Buffy is definitely one where you look back and go like, this is some like 90s,
Oh, that's totally some '90s
2000
practical
stuff.
effects stuff. What do they do in True Blood? How do they deal with? I've
They
never really
mostly
watched
just
any other
got the
vampire
teeth,
content.
They
Oh, they got the
are
teeth.
they're more just
Keep them
like
pretty.
fangs only. What I do like about Buffy and True Blood, and Angel is that they do stick to like the vampires can only come out at night. I like that because,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to the Twilight world and it's very symbolic of what it is. It's like, and I enjoy those movies. So this is not to hate on them,
I
but
found
like they
myself in
glitter in
the
the
line
sun.
for clips.
And I'm like, no,
No
no,
idea
no, no,
how.
no. These people need to like set on fire. It like makes the stakes
Oh my
higher
god.
for how everything works. But I do think, yeah, Angel does kind of set this tone for shows that keep going on in the vampire world of making more of it like vampires in reality. And
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something that True Blood takes to like the even next level where it's about them like coming out of the coffin is what they call it and getting rights and their political presence in the world in addition to their just actual presence and like what it means to be somebody who interacts with a vampire and how accepting they are and they go into a lot of layers but I think that that's something you can all think about for a sec and Daniel direct me on that.
Yeah, I've personally not watched any other real vampire content. I mean, to be honest, like that whole subject matter, I never really strayed towards it. So maybe that's why I never really paid. Or also, Angel did air before I was kind of watching primetime television too. But yeah, so I'm not too like privy on the comparisons. I do like there was sort of like a fun interaction. I mean, obviously it's in a clever way they were kind of able to be like, all right, well, a lot of the rules people do think about vampires is through just like bad media and stereotyping, and they're able to kind of create the rules through kind of like a fun subtext of Angel being like, all right, like come on, like um through
He
fun
kind of
dialogue,
shows that they can
and
be the
make the rules of the
good
show.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do the sort of like, oh yeah, he drinks like just like either blood donor blood or,
Oh yeah, yeah,
animal
that's right.
blood, whatever they
I
have in
forgot
the
about all that. I
thermoses.
forgot that they like
Yeah,
keep the vampire thing. It's like such a yeah. I don't know. It's just part of the show that I like hardly paid attention to. It's funny, but they do kind of keep it up if that is
they
something you
do.
want to like watch it for.
It's weirdly not as in your face as you would think it would be,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more just like he'll have a thermos in the fridge and it's like, do not drink
Right.
because
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
be you'll be real bummed. And it's like, yeah, you would be bummed. And yeah, we were talking about it too, where the episode we watched in season 5 had to do with Harmony, which is a character from the Buffyverse
Fun
as
fact
well.
about Harmony. Harmony is the only
Yes.
character that appears in the unaired 1996 Buffy the Vampire Slayer pilot and the very last episode of Angel. She's like the longest running character
Wow.
if you start in an uncanon episode.
That is pretty cool. I like
I
that.
like those.
That is
Yeah, I like those kind of fun facts.
that is a fun fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she is like sprinkled throughout both shows, like a fair amount because
So is
she
she like an antagonist in Buffy? Because she comes in at the end of Angel and she joins the
a
main
little
cast,
bit.
and she's kind of like a comedic sort of side character, as most dramas have. But it seems like she had some like it kind of seems like she was always comedic, but that she also might have had some higher stakes conflicts with the characters in early in Buffy, not Angel.
Yeah. She is like a lovable enemy because she used to be kind of like Spike's girlfriend slash fling.
Oh,
So
that
they would,
works. Okay, I see. I
yeah.
see that.
So they would kind of like, you know, they'd get into trouble, but at the same time, they'd help out when it was like, oh, well, we both don't like this collective bad guy. We're like, we're supposed to be the kind of, endearing we wear leather jackets and we're bad boys. Like they're supposed to be kind of like the Fonzies, but they're not really
Mm.
supposed to be. Like, I mean, Spike starts out pretty evil, but by the time he kind of gets together with Harmony, he's definitely going towards the path of like, I'm gonna be like not one of the gang, but kind of a once in a while I'll help out and I'll at least stay out of trouble with
Mm.
them. So yeah,
Okay.
then she comes back and she's in this role where she's like, I want to be getting more involved at work and get attention. And she thinks like no one's really paying attention to her and that she doesn't have as many friends at work. And then it happens to be that this coworker is working against her, which everyone thinks like is kind of like, ugh, would that really happen? And then it does. And it's just funny seeing it now because it's a lot of I think a lot of people could relate to it in a trying to move up the ranks at work way. And you do kind of feel for her, even though she's like, knocking people out and throwing them in the closet to be like, sorry, I really have to prove myself innocent first. And we'll get back to you later. And that's like, yeah, typical kind of Joss Whedon universe of like, just oopsies and we'll get back to you. And you're like, the people with all the casual concussions are like, I mean, like, couldn't we have just discussed this earlier, please? But it's, yeah, I feel like it's an episode where you're kind of like, it is falls into that filler space, but you're also
It's
like, you're enjoying the ride.
yeah,
It's very
it's a fun
comforting.
procedural episode about
Yeah.
that puts the side previously antagonistic like selfish character into a protagonistic role, and it is fun. It's the first half of for being a final season 5 is interestingly paced. It's kind of like you said. It's like it speeds up. It speeds up once they realize that the end is near and they have a lot to say and a lot to finish. But up until then, the Harm's Way season 5 episode 9 it's a really fun procedural episode that does a good job at like showing character or showing kind of like I guess a whimsical style of the show
Yeah, because she
when it
finds
wants to
this
be.
guy supposed to be like a mediator between these demon clans, and she's like had a one night stand, but then he has like the vampire bites, and it's like, oh no. But it's funny because they just like do a lot of these little like her version of a walk of shame is like putting the body down the
Oh yeah,
into
that
the
was great.
dumpster
That was
and like
great.
and all these little things of like I'm afraid I'm gonna get tested at work and test positive for human blood and they have I do think like that episode also serves the purpose of showing what how kind of quirky it is that they're in this office life and on top of that like a law firm that's supposed to be very prim and proper but they're all kind of these like clumsy magical creatures that have all these weird like rules to follow from corporate and then rules to follow from their own world. And it's once they've kind of infiltrated the, law firm that they were once working against. So it's I read in an article, I think it was the Vox article, that a lot of this show is about working against the system, then becoming a part of the system, then like trying to beat the system from within. And that's like a big metaphor that they're trying to run through an Angel. And I read that going like, that is a really good point. A lot of this does kind of have to be like, they're like sticking it to the man in the beginning. And then, he sort of kind of goes back and forth with what's right and wrong And then towards the end, you're kind of almost wondering, like, did he choose the to like be more with them? And then in the end, you're like, no, no, no. He was just collecting information and he's gonna get him.
Yeah.
But you still don't find out because they do end on many, from reading a lot of fan threads,
Hmm.
it sounds like people are somewhat torn on whether this is a cliffhanger or not, because in a way they're like, well, you know what they do when they go into battle, and it does end with them kind of going against the senior partners, which I think that's like a really funny thing they do too, is like their their enemies are called the senior partners.
I
And
think it's
it's
fun
like,
how they're foreshadowed through. I don't even know if if it was anticipated or if they just kind of made it work,
yeah,
just with the confines of what they had left. But it is kind of fun, like who the senior partners are and what the final conflict of the series is. I personally don't see the finale as a cliffhanger. I see it very philosophically in line with the show and a great final statement.
I think
And
so too.
yeah, it's in line. What's your favorite episode? Do you have one? Right before we start.
Ah, I have a few. I do really like the pilot. I another one that I watch. I do like the one, even though it's cheesy, but it's just because it's like a nice uh bowl of ice cream, is the one where Buffy comes back and he gets to be human for a day. It does not serve much for the Angel show, but for a Buffy viewer, you're like, oh, that's sweet. But you're also like sad for Angel because he has to live with that. And then they do a lot of fun things later on. Like I liked the puppet episode. I can't
Oh,
remember
Smile
what
Time's
it's called.
amazing. That's a
Yeah, that
fun
one is like
episode.
you watch that and you're like, oh, and I was reading stuff from the cast that was saying like the guy who did the puppets, like after between takes, he still gave notes with one of the puppets. Like he just like stayed committed to being a puppeteer. And I was like, I appreciate that a lot. Like Buffy is really well known for the musical episodes. So it's not very surprising that Angel also does some like extra creative
Oh, I
risks.
watched one of the musical episodes, I think, in season 5. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I've heard things about Buffy's musical episode.
they're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoever coordinates that is chef's kiss. Quite quite good. Like, and they also seem to have ensemble casts that have, which I mean many shows do, like people with like theater backgrounds, and that helps because it's not just like, that when you're watching and you can tell there's a clear difference between the actor's voice and the singer's voice, and you're like, great. But on a lot of these, you're like, no, that's them. That checks.
Yeah. That's fun.
so so it's cool. But yeah, what's your favorite episode? Do you have one that is like more nailed down?
Uh yeah, it's got to be the finale, I think.
Wow, I like that.
It's honestly, it's one because I really enjoyed the last scene, and two because when I think of the series, I think of the Wesley lie to me scene in the finale and the wrap up of his character arc. And
Yeah,
it's a good payoff. It's a really really strong payoff. And yeah, that's kind of that's just like what I identify the show like when I think about the show. It's the first scene I think about.
I
Um,
think a lot of strong endings don't show you everything, because I
yeah,
think the main thing some people like thought this show ended as a cliffhanger as were like, oh, well, we didn't get to see the battle. But in my opinion, I'm like, well, you've seen all the other ones, and
exactly.
you're supposed to kind of go on with it being like, well, if these characters were going to get killed off, you would see that.
Yep,
So, you know, go with that and be like, it's gonna be like the other scenarios you've seen, and these characters have been so consistent from start to finish and with their growth that you know what they're going to do at this point. So it's not like the jarring like, well, what happened next? And I
exactly.
like this. Like some people don't like the having to fill your cup up yourself a little bit with like, how would I imagine all these things? But I think it's like the sign of a good show if you're able to piece that together and also be okay with it, since a lot of classic controversial endings of shows is a lot of times the fans are just like upset the show is over.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to stick a landing.
That's
It's
more the thing of
just
like having to say goodbye and being like, and I don't get to see every millisecond of how this wraps up. And I think when you step back and watch it later, you can appreciate it more because you're not as emotionally tied to this is ending.
if it's true to itself, it'll work out as an ending. And yeah. And I
Yeah.
believe Angels is. And speaking of endings, that's probably where we should call it on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you call this segment? You had a great name for this segment. Ghost of Primetime's Past for Angel?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Hope you enjoyed the Ghost of Primetime's Past for Angel. If you have a favorite episode, if you watched Angel, if you have thoughts on Angel, let us know. Hit us up. You know where to find us, or info@ptptshow.com, or leave a voicemail, and we can place some thoughts. Otherwise, that should do it for the third episode of Primetime Party Time. Thank you for joining us. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Catch us live Monday nights at ptptshow.com, doing something a little more performative next week. And yeah, thank you for BMAC and Wendy for helping us put this episode together with your thoughts on Angel. We're your hosts,
Tracy
and Daniel, and we're going to let this underscore run just a little bit longer because there are some other people that the show could not have been made without. We're talking about Fen, who did the artwork. Find her at Fen Latte on Instagram. This theme song by Jay Wright. Find him at jwrightmusic.com, our website, helped by our good friend Coco. And that's pretty much it for Primetime Party Time. Our stream went out halfway through.
No.
Yeah. I mean, we got to back up. But went out.
Is that when I hopped off?
No, it's when I said
No,
wait in the middle of something you were saying, and because I just was trying to, I don't know. We got through it.